Hello. Good evening, everyone. My name is Cindy. I'm in the Corporation of Victoria, in the Corporation of Australia, and I've been reading Niki Raapana's 2020 Our Common Destiny. I'm up to chapter 3. Many thanks to the friend who sent to Dane, who sent me the book. Chapter 3 is called Asset-Based Community. I do apologise for the delay between readings. I've been really busy, and I will get to it. Asset-Based Community Development, ABCD, is this chapter. A communitarian system requires a database of everything. It needs a map of every piece of land and an inventory of its contents. Every drop of water, animal, plant, insect, the air above it, the minerals below it, and every individual living on Earth. So this is the great inventory. Any economic system is based on inventory of assets and how those assets are traded, how they are dispersed, how they are appropriated. And communitarianism has a huge component in the technological economic system. The economic system is unchanged from time eternal, basically. It's based on scarcity. That's what it's actually the definition of economics is scarcity. Without it, we don't have this, supply and demand and all the models around that. So fabricated scarcity is how an economic system is designed. Now, to have an economic system, you must have goods and products and things to be traded, and those things have always been. But now we're really moving into the human inventory as well. And not just, the minerals that we know, gold and oil and titanium and whatever, but now we're talking about microbes in the soil. So it's basically just a leveling up of the inventory and a leveling up of the trading markets. And Niki here quotes, "Rather than focus on problems that need to be fixed, asset-based strategies build on individual and community strengths mobilized around a vision for community development." This is from Sustainable Seattle, that group that was referred to in the other chapter. Mobilization is also one of those key words that we find in propaganda all the time, mobilizing groups and so on and so forth. The good things that make up an area are the community's assets. Asset-based community development, ABCD, was designed by communitarian professors John McKnight and Jody Kurtzman. Kurtzman publicly denies being a communitarian, but McKnight, his co-author, signed the Responsive Communitarian Platform. They believe it is their job to gather and distribute assets. Community developers are going to force everyone to share what they have, because sharing is a new requirement of global citizenship. In Mapping and Mobilizing Community Capacity, authors John McKnight and Jody Kurtzman spell out building a sustainable community based on neighbourhood assets. People in Australia may have seen neighbourhood batteries being sort of fitted into large light poles. I saw them in Port Macquarie in New South Wales. So those community batteries will be relied upon, and people will be fighting over, the energy that they can get from them, because there's not a whole lot you can put into a battery. These assets are, okay, sorry, I was talking about actual infrastructure, but Niki continues, these assets are human skills and abilities. ABCD screens people for trainability and leadership potential. All residents in the community are analysed for their usable assets or their potential for crime. Depending on their assets, they will receive training and status. If they have no assets that the mappers can see, will they go to prisons, treatment centres or mental health facilities? She asks. Leaders are rewarded with no-bid government contracts, big fat grants and higher ranks in volunteer corps. Modern volunteerism is mandatory. I hope people have noticed that the emergency forces, response teams, whatever, they keep asking for, volunteers, and volunteerism is a big thing at schools as well. I'm sure in America, the kids are towards finishing high school or whatever it's called over there, secondary school, are incentivized to do, work experience here and there, put this on your resume. I know that volunteerism in Australia counts for a lot if it's on your resume. And, why is it that way? Why are we being pushed in that direction? Because ultimately we're not going to have a cash society as we do now. We won't even really have money in the sense that we do now. It will all be about tokens. You'll have credits for good deeds, and you'll have demerits for bad deeds. And volunteerism will be a way to inflate your credit rating and to move up from the bare essentials that Universal Basic Income, UBI, will afford you. So you might be able to afford, to breathe and, to drink water and to sustain yourself, to keep your, heartbeat alive as though you're on a life support system. But to get a little bit ahead or to do something more than bare existence, to perhaps have access to reality privileges, volunteerism will be a thing. The World Economic Forum has made plenty of ads in this regard. I remember seeing the timeshare campaign where they were inviting young people to do volunteering in nursing homes and old people's homes and residential homes and nursing homes and all that sort of thing, hospitals, and that time that they put in would be banked for when they were older. So if you want to have like medical insurance cover in the future, you won't be paying out of your salary, some portion of your income over the years, so that you have some store of some repository of money that you can then say, okay, I'm going to choose this nursing home, or I'm going to choose that hospital, or how things are sort of at the moment. You'll have a timeshare credit. You put in this many hours and this is what you get in return, somebody to look after you. Now, bear in mind that this sort of forced, coerced volunteerism, if you want, medical assistance, if you want retirement assistance for when you're older, well, then you have to put the hours in now that you're 20. I think many people will begrudge that sort of volunteerism because you're not really getting anything on the spot. There's very little incentive and reward to be thinking, oh, in 40 years, I might need help. And anything that isn't really by pure choice, we resent. And so I don't know what sort of care people are going to be getting from people who begrudgingly just go along and do these hours, put in the hours for free for the first however many years, hoping that one day it comes back to them. So we will see the quality of all services continue to decline, in other words. Uh-oh, I'm doing a lot of interrupting already. It's a short chapter. Sorry, let me just find where I am. Modern volunteerism is mandatory. It is not the old-fashioned show up and do what needs to be done variety. It requires a vast amount of information and the means to gather it. So when you're doing this volunteerism, you know, in 2030 or 2035, we need to have records, you know, in 2065, 2075 of what you did. And that will be part of your blockchain. It would probably be part of your soul-bound tokens. So soul, spelled S-O-U-L, bound, tied to your cell, to your soul tokens. So that will be digital tokens that cannot be swapped or traded, that are tied intimately to your biometrics and can't be shifted around. So to have that granular detail, well, you'll have to have a digital ID, you'll have to do all of that for the future. So everything's basically, there's a lot of trust that we need to have in this system that is, on the other side, a no trust, zero trust system. So there's no trusting of you to do the right thing. Hence we have the digital ID watching you, and we have ratings for everything that you do and reviews for you as a person, basically. On the other hand, you need to trust that in, you know, 20, 30, 40 years, what you put in will come back to you. You know, you just have to say a prayer to the AI gods, I suppose. It requires a vast amount of information and the means to gather it. That's why community developers are always saying, we need more data. They must have it to build thorough community maps. Community maps start with an inventory of what we already have. In cities, developers tear down old blocks to build condos, shopping centres and transit lines. Detailed asset maps help them determine the best use for all property along major city routes, so they can manage residents and build communities that are more sustainable. Jody Kurtzman presented ABCD to Seattle neighbourhoods in June of 2000. At the time, I was working with Nancy Rising, an active Seattle Democrat. Nancy emailed me her invitation to the meeting and asked if this new thing had anything to do with our research. I didn't know, so I looked ABCD up online and printed a few pages. I read it on the 20-minute bus ride to downtown and arrived at Town Hall just in time for the Dog and Pony Show. They actually call it that. I think they borrow a lot of ideas from magazine salesmen. The ABCD presentation opened with an eloquent explanation of why problem solving has to be replaced with a new attitude toward community building. Kurtzman explained why our focus had to shift away from such narrow, negative approaches. He showed us better ways to rebuild better and safer communities. I don't know how many times I've heard better, safer communities. He told us joyfully to get out there and identify our assets instead of our problems. Since my interest in this research began with housing and urban development's data gathering programs for blighted communities, I was more than familiar with the city's determination to gather our private information. As Kurtzman spoke, I scanned my copy of the introduction to his book. When the Q&A arrived, I asked him if I was reading his book correctly. Is this a mapping database program? I asked. Can people withdraw from it? He assured me they weren't real maps, The part about going door to door gathering information was only used figuratively. In HUD and COPS, crime prevention programs, however, knock and talks are common. In the 1980s, COPS made a regular practice of going door to door, interviewing neighbours and identifying potential problems. The program is different everywhere you go. They use different strategies and approaches depending on the community. In some areas, the developers are interested in enticing corporate industry. High-tech companies need skilled workers. A thorough database of the residents and their skills and abilities was necessary to globally promote community development. Gathering information and uncovering hidden assets is essential to the plan. They're always coming up with nice ways to do this. In Anchorage, local planners have asked everyone with special needs or disabilities to please turn over all their information to the police in case of an emergency. I'm not sure how many examples I could come up with were I not sitting right here in front of a camera. I will have a go though. We have, Facebook was basically a database. I think everybody knows that by now, that it's a DARPA program. And so, this is, it's an intelligence gathering tool. And there's so much information on there that we freely offer, as well as all the sensing technology that is in the tracking phones that track all our movements. And we know this, we know they track what we say, they listen. You say something and all of a sudden there's the ad for it. Sometimes you don't need to say anything at all and there's the ad for it. Google Maps holds all that information. All of Gmail has, a record of, who you contacted, to have, some kind of gynecological screen, to which party you attended. The amount of information available through even just the census that's done in Australia, where everybody receives a whole lot of paperwork and has to fill out how many people were living at the house at the time, and then it gets more and more and more granular, the information that is being collected and asked for. We get surveys all the time, have your say all the time. I could go on about a new way of, I think I will actually talk about this. So have your say has been something that we have been seeing online for a number of years now. We get something from some politician or some member of parliament asking, oh, do you think we should, change that street to a 30-kilometre zone, or just pedestrianise it entirely? Have your say. Put, thumbs up for yes and, and a heart for no, or something like that. And so what we see is that we are being trained into voting yay or nay, only yay or nay. There's never, what do you actually think? Like, tell us in your own words. That doesn't work with an artificial intelligence system. We need a binary way for collecting data. That is the simplest format for any algorithm, yay or nay, to a question. And this is going to evolve into the new how we represent ourselves. So we're demolishing governments, constitutions and parliaments to have the one consolidated world government, which will be the UN working through the councils, and so that we can have our say and feel like we are participating in the new democracy. New democracy is generally how it's distinguished from the traditional democracy. will be through internetic, yay, nay buttons, basically. And I've called this, Tinder governance, because it reminds me of, flick left or flick right, or scroll left or scroll right, depending on how you feel about a person. Is it a yay or a nay? This is how we're going to, how the powers will get, reported, self-reported, either support for something or not. And so pay close attention to how many questions you will see come up online. Sometimes they are veiled as like ads or psychological tests. Other times they're just outright, some member of some party asking what you think, by, through this very infantile press, a heart, or press the smiley face, or press, the crying face, or the angry face, whatever. So anyone who's seen the movie Idiocracy might understand that we are being treated like 3-year-olds at this point, to make big decisions on, future planning of, whole regions, and, what we're going to do with the roads, and, how we're going to, I don't know, what we're going to do with inheritance. We're going to abolish it altogether, just, press this or press that, so that's in the making, and it's happening. There was a recent example in, I forget the country, where there were protests against the government. And they set Parliament on fire. If anybody remembers which country that was, they can mention it. That would be great. It won't come to me now. And so what they did, because there was this grassroots revolution, which was anything but a grassroots revolution. There's no such thing as, Gen Z revolted. They went down to town and, they set Parliament on fire because, they were taking away their social media or some rubbish like that. And so this was basically an organized coup d'etat on whichever government was in place at the time. And they made it look in the media as though it was, this thing that the people wanted. And in order to put in some interim government or, talking head, what they did was they asked on social media, who do you want to represent you? This person or that person? And so they actually qualified putting in a bureaucrat to, run the show, so to speak, to make political decisions or economic decisions in a time of turmoil through a social media survey of Gen Zers. And we are meant to believe that this is, representative of a whole country. It's very sad, but it's true, and it's happening, and it will continue until it makes sense even to Westerners to do this. And if anyone has any illusions about having their say, I would ask them to have a look at all the referendums that have happened in the last at least 30 years, and to see around the world in the West, and to see how many of those have just been overturned. Because the powers that be actually will cite that there's some loophole, and that they don't have to actually take instruction from the people. They were just asking for their opinion. The most recent one would be the treaty, Indigenous Peoples Treaties, First Nations, blah, blah, here in Australia. It was called The Voice, and it was about installing a corporate entity named The Voice and proclaimed to be representative of the native peoples, when really it was just a corporation. It was a segregation method, you know, can we have these people as a separate power in Parliament? And the Australian people overwhelmingly voted no. However, in Victoria, we have since signed over basically all of Melbourne and its surrounds, and I don't know how many kilometres this thing extends, but basically we have made a treaty anyway which goes against the will of the people as shown in the referendum. This also happened in Greece with Brexit. I was there at the time, and it was something like 72% of people said, yeah, we want out. And 2 days later, we were in. It happened in Ireland, from memory as well. I'm not sure, it was a decade, I think more than a decade, maybe 2 decades ago. So referendums mean nothing. Have your say means nothing. It's just propaganda that people, it's, you know, they're just chewing the crud, really. They're just going, yeah, I had my say, I, you know, got to fill something in, I pressed yay or nay or like or thumbs down, and oh well, but you know, and that was it. And they feel that they have participated in their own governance structure. I definitely won't be reading another chapter, even though this one is short. Okay, so I'll just back read a little bit. They're always coming up with nice ways to do this. In Anchorage, local planners have asked everyone with special needs or disabilities to please turn over all their information to the police in case of an emergency. Quoting, hello, from part 1 of the ABCD interview that they did. Hello, I'm with local organisation's name. We're talking to local people about their skills. With this information, we hope to help people contribute to improving the neighbourhood, find jobs, or start businesses. May I ask you some questions about your skills and abilities? Now I'm going to read to you a list of skills. It's an extensive list, so I hope you'll bear with me. I'll read the skills, and you just say yes whenever we get to one that you have. We are interested in all your skills and abilities. They may have been learned through experience in the home or with your family. They may be skills you've learned at church or in the community. They may also be skills you have learned on the job. So that was what it sounded like to receive a call. When the census records were stopped from expanding after Hispanic Americans complained about the invasive nature of questions, community developers explored other ways of obtaining personal data. Eventually, they made answering American community surveys mandatory, just like here in Australia. While it worked on immigrants who are unfamiliar with US law, bullying and harassment didn't fly with established American families. They're a persistent bunch, though communitarians never give up the ultimate goal. They just keep coming up with new ideas. The next one was to take a more positive approach that would go over better in yuppie hippie neighbourhoods. New interviews were written to identify neighbourhood assets as well as problems. In this way, ABCD has been monitoring and gathering personal data on individuals for years. The mapping process is intricate, but to simplify things, they have designated humans and animals into corridors. As data is gathered and disseminated, all beings are assigned to their living quarters. Non-human species actually have precedence over humans, and they are given much larger spaces in which to live. People cannot be allowed to roam free and harm the delicate ecosystems of Earth. We are a threat to the future of the planet. human activity is so-called wildlife corridors is strictly regulated. Australians know how many places are off limits now to visitation. And again, we come back to, well, they're citing that the native peoples have these sacred sites and therefore you can't visit them. These are just natural land formations. And at the same time, we have the greenies saying, oh no, you know, we're removing humans because, you know, the koalas, you know, may go extinct or something. We have an abundance of species here, and natural species and native species. And I don't know, I would expect anything anywhere near extinction wouldn't be like, you know, running around on the trees outside where I live. That I wouldn't expect to see them. I'm not a particular, you know, nature person that's out in nature all the time, and yet, you know, they're there all the time, no matter where I've been up and down the coast of Australia. So I don't think there's, you know, any threat of extinction when they're hanging out in metropolitan areas and very built up areas. But we have these justifications that city people, in particular, people that live in concrete jungles that have no trees or barely any, will believe that the whole of Australia is built up and overpopulated, and that, you know, we have to leave and abandon, you know, 30% of the land and maybe 50% of all of Australia, for, you know, the possums and the koalas and the native animals, and for the native tribes who, you know, lived here first and, you know, decided that, you know, different areas were sacred spots and that, you know, white people shouldn't ever look at them or walk on them or take photos of them or climb the rocks. I'll get back to it. In a very short time, travel outside of human corridors will cease altogether as we are herded into urban centres and are reduced down to either problems or assets. Are you a problem or are you an asset? Get in your 15-minute city. There are two basic kinds of community assets. One is an employee, the other is a volunteer. Employees supervise all volunteer helper efforts. It is impossible to expect a far-off supervisor to actually know every one of the people whose lives they control. A safe communitarian community would keep an updated, thorough database map of each individual life. Rebuilding community requires a lot: meetings, maps, labour and materials. Communitarians emphasise the need to retrain Americans to rebuild community. It is in the interest of the community at large to identify and tag every individual, place him or her on a map, and assign him or her to a job helping the community. At some point, we're not exactly sure when, somebody up top decided that Americans can no longer be trusted to do anything for themselves without professional corporate supervision. So, private firms wait like carrion birds at the edge of disasters to provide the technology, supervisors and planners for rebuilding. Our renewed sense of commitment requires that we all pitch in for nothing while they make bank. Just ask anyone in Louisiana or Mississippi right now. The Department of Homeland Security uses ABCD maps too, of course, and it is vital to security. In 2003, the United States merged 22 government agencies under the Office of the Director of Homeland Security. They work closely with the old Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA. Both agencies have clear communitarian missions. I think we saw FEMA with a COVID, right? We're protecting the community. You wear a mask, you test, you isolate, and all the rest of it. Under the supremacy of communitarian law, FEMA and Homeland Security are the ultimate authorities in any domestic emergency in the USA. The 2005 Katrina response was an exercise of expanded federal leadership over local decision-making networks. In true communitarian spirit, FEMA turned away local assistance and invited foreign NATO troops instead. While the world watched in horror, FEMA stopped Americans from helping each other. This is very similar to something that happened 2 or 3 years ago here on the east coast of Australia, where we had incredible flooding and Australians weren't able to help other Australians, and we had to wait for, government directed help and all sorts of things. Also with the wildfires in 2019, the coordinated efforts of the Red Cross and so on and so forth took precedence, and people are still waiting to rebuild their homes like 5-6 years later. It's a big cluster of problems that we see, and that everything needs to be like the bureaucratic way, the authoritative way, which doesn't seem to work out very well. It stops true community helping each other, and because all this communitarian babble and all this we are one and we help each other is actually really, it's a leaderboard, okay? It's, you've got a number and you have a credit rating, and each good thing you do only counts if it's done through electronic online means. So if you just hand a homeless guy $5 in cash on the street, you didn't do a good deed because it was not recognized by the omniscient AI gods. Okay, it didn't go on the blockchain. It wasn't measured. We didn't see how much, like how much you gave whom, and did he really deserve it, and where did you get that money from? And no, we need a really granular inventory of who, what, when, where, why, and they will decide, what charity means. Kind of like when you go to somebody's wedding and they say, oh, instead of gifts, please donate to such and such charity, or instead of my birthday gift, please donate to such and such charity. Or when they're doing fundraisers at school, and it's like, oh, let's pick a charity to do fundraising for. Like if I wanted to help somebody, I don't kind of like wake up in the morning and go, I just want to help anyone, like whatever, like let me Google who I can help. Let's toss a coin and see who we can help. That's not how humans operate. Like we if you have a cause in front of you, something that you want to participate in, you'll help however you can, whether that's cutting sandwiches or, I don't know, warming up bottles of milk or providing cash or whatever it is. Charity not only begins at home, but it comes from the heart. Now, when we, participate in charities just because it looks good on social media and our friends think we're good people, we're altruistic, we're not selfish, wanting more gifts and more things for ourselves, but we are entitled colonizers who now have to give back. Are we starting to see a problem, particularly when we look at the salaries that these CEOs of these not-for-profit charities are actually making? I mean, they are making like $500,000 a year in conservative figures. I'll never understand how that is charity. When I am charitable, it means I lose something to give to somebody else, okay? It costs me to help someone. If I'm making a profit to help by helping someone, then let's not call it charity. Let's call it something else. Let's call it business, perhaps. Profiteering. Making bank on the broken. And let's come back to economics. When broken people are profit turning machines, okay, then there is incentive to increase the supply of broken people, okay? If I'm a business that makes money, profits from helping people, I want more people to be broken for me to fix, to make more money. And this is what social impact investing basically is. In like the nuts and bolts of it is that people that are broken, people that are expected to be broken, perhaps might be broken according to our modeling that we did on this computer. We put in bad data and out it spat some, bad answer and said, hey, X, Y, Z, they might have trouble in 5 or 10 years because, hey, you know what? They had problems going to the toilet when they were children. So in order to circumvent this, we will put them on this, intervention. And in the end, when they don't have issues with XYZ, then we'll pat ourselves on the back and we'll pay ourselves, and we'll also get paid by the government too for preventing something that the computer said would happen. So it's all made up fairy stories, in other words. And again, I remind you that broken people are profitable to social impact investing. Moreover, an environment that is devastated is also very profitable to social impact investors, because there's also, the nature, the environmental branch of impact investing. And so in order to have companies, coming to the rescue, some disaster must have happened. And so we will have disasters, deliberate engineered disasters, and lo and behold, there will be companies that, somehow had looked into a crystal ball and have a solution. And this solution to perhaps replace the pollinators with, AI pollinators, little robotic nano pollinators, oh, look, we had this in the pipeline, we've been working on it for 20 years, who would have thought that we have a solution? And it's only going to cost this much, and it's going to save us all, we've done the maths. We've done the arithmetic, we've calculated it. The real bees, we're doing the work which we've evaluated or valued to be worth $5 trillion. Now, Boston Robotics, let's say Boston Robotics, have, pollinating nanobots that can do the same job or close to or whatever. And that's going to cost, $1 billion. And so, this makes economic sense. But also they need to be paid. Okay? So, to compensate for the loss of bees or pollinators, well, we've got the nano ones, but they're going to cost you something, but it's not that much anyway. And look, they're doing a great deed. For only $1 billion, we get 5 trillion worth of value. And this is like the sorts of principles that social impact investing work with. Quoting a FEMA news release from August 29th, 2005. Michael D. Brown, Under Secretary of Homeland Security for Emergency Preparedness and Response and head of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, today urged all fire and emergency services departments not to respond to counties and states affected by Hurricane Katrina without being requested and lawfully dispatched by state and local authorities under mutual aid agreements and the Emergency Management Assistance Compact. Compact is another word for contract. The response to Hurricane Katrina must be well coordinated between federal, state and local officials to most effectively protect life and property, Brown said. We appreciate the willingness and generosity of our nation's first responders to deploy during such disasters, but such efforts must be coordinated so that fire rescue efforts are the most effective possible. Not even doctors were allowed in, says Niki. Quoting again, quoting NBC Investigative Unit for September 8, 2005. One medical assessment team, veterans of 31 disasters, can treat hundreds of patients a day, but for 11 days it's been repeatedly redirected by FEMA from Alabama to Biloxi to Dallas to Galveston. So far they've treated one small cut, said Lisa Mayers for an article titled Relief Chaos in Katrina's Wake, Indecision Prevented Aid from Reaching Those Who Needed It Most. So 31 veterans of disasters, what did they manage? They treated a cut. Because that's what they were told to do. Otherwise, there would have been legal repercussions. So, after Americans were turned away and even local rescuers were stopped from helping the many thousands of stranded victims who were left to suffer for over a week, the United States government decided to ask NATO for help. After mobilizing a mission within 3 to 5 days, NATO was authorized to send the Mexican and Canadian navies out onto US soil. Quoting again, NATO ambassadors were expected to make a decision on the request on Friday, 9th of September 2005, and a mission could be mobilized within 3 to 5 days, September 12th to September 14th, of an agreement on what was to be transported. The United States asked NATO on Thursday for help in transporting European aid to victims of Hurricane Katrina amid concerns that assistance is not getting through to the devastated region quickly enough. And that's a quote from Reuters on September the 8th, 2005, and the title was US Seeks More NATO Help on Katrina. For some unknown reason, about 200 Mexican seamen left Mexico City 2 days before NATO ambassadors made their decision. Quoting from El Universal on September 27, 2005, the title of the article was Army to Leave US After Historic Mission. And the quote is, among their accomplishments were preparing and serving nearly 160,000 hot meals and performing 660 dental and medical exams. Unarmed since leaving Mexico City on September the 7th, the nearly 200 soldiers shook hands Monday with local dignitaries during a ceremony of appreciation before their expected departure early Tuesday for Mexico City. According to NATO, the United States was an early test of the alliance's much heralded NATO Response Force, NFR for short, a rapid reaction fighting unit created to allow it to deploy in trouble zones across the globe within a matter of days. This isn't local resilience and community building and community helping, is it? Much like the operations in Bosnia and Iraq, Katrina created serious issues with the no-bid contract idea. Quoting again from MSNBC, September 27, 2005, Chris Matthews says, 80% of the $1.5 billion that's been let out in contracts for recovery efforts down in the Gulf have gone to no-bid contracts. Debating FEMA's no-bid contracts, Congressman King and Thompson play hardball with MSNBC's Matthews. So, no-bid contracts, excellent. So they put out tenders, well, not really, because a tender is something that you bid on. So, like, this is basic cronyism, you know, friends of friends, you know. Whom do you know? It's like when you get a job because you know someone. It's exactly the same, much higher up the pyramid. You know, if you've got the right friends, you get the right contracts. And that's really that simple. Katrina helped push the idea And that's at the expense of helping people, okay? Katrina helped push the idea for chipping Americans too. She's quoting here, was she quoting MSNBC again? The ultimate solution may be that provided by a service called VeriMed, spelled VeriMed. As do the other providers, VeriMed stores your PHR online, but then also provides a tiny chip that is implanted, usually under the skin of your upper arm, containing a unique 16-digit number, said Michael Rogers. Create your own digital medical record. How to make sure your vital information isn't lost. Very important in the context of climate change disasters that displace people from, areas of devastation. So there's a massive tidal wave, a tsunami, you don't have your passport in your pocket. Those only fall out of aeroplanes that are pulverizing buildings. That's the only time they survive. So the only kind of ID you can possibly have is a digital ID, perhaps a facial recognition ID, if not a chip. And there are very prominent Australians getting very big grants in the biggest of universities to be implementing international laws as such, which are to take displaced people and to help them, but that help comes with a range of stipulations, a laundry list of criteria that they must meet, and all of that is computational data. It's all leading towards, okay, if you've got a digital ID, if we can scan your face, if we know your medical records without, you're like, you've just been pulled out of the water, that's all you have, the wet clothes on your back and nothing more, we'll be able to help you if we have a way of identifying you. Because, of course, only identified persons deserve any help, right? It's the only way we can coordinate how much food we'll give to you so that you don't steal too much, so that you don't take too many loaves of bread. We need to know we gave you the loaf of bread. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the World Bank perfected the principles for capacity map making. They have extensive experience with rebuilding communities in Africa, Asia, and South America. They call their capacity building programs nice sounding names like human resettlements. It would appear that the Palestinian people, who were resettled after Israeli revolutionaries invited the British and Arabs, have the most hands-on experience with modern human resettlements. The world will do well to learn from the success the program has had in that portion of the Middle East. The security barrier between Palestinian and Israeli sectors, which resembles the Berlin Wall, is a clear indication of the limits placed on people who won't give up their assets. Amitai Etzioni doesn't just give advice to US presidents and international heads of state. He is developing a gentler civil society and wants to combine soft powers such as economic sanctions and hard powers such as the American military might to control rogue states like Iran and any other nation that refuses to submit to despotic communitarian democracy. Communitarians are smooth and will easily shift the blame from imperialism to nationalism and justify the invasion and desecration of some of the oldest civilizations in the world. Quoting, from 1982 to 1984, Colonel Oliver North assisted FEMA in drafting its civil defense preparations. Details of these plans emerged during the 1987 Iran-Contra scandal. They included executive orders providing for suspension of the Constitution, the imposition of martial law, internment camps, and the turning over of government to the President and FEMA. A Miami Herald article on July 5th, 1987 reported that the former FEMA director Louis Guifreda's deputy, John Brinkenhoff, handled the martial law portion of the planning. The plan was said to be similar to the one Mr. Guifreda had developed earlier to combat a national uprising by black militants. It provided for the detention of at least 21 million American Negroes in assembly centers or relocation camps. Today, Mr. Brinkenhoff is with the highly influential Anza Institute for Homeland Security, following a request by the Pentagon in January that the US military be allowed the option of deploying troops on American streets. The Institute in February published a paper by Mr. Brinkenhoff arguing the legality of this. This comes from the Foundations Are in Place for Martial Law in the US by Rit Goldstein of the Sydney Morning Herald, the 27th of July 2002. After the trauma of September the 11th, the US government declared an international war on terror. In 2002, President Bush listed his priorities in the war. Number 2 was rebuilding America. Bush emphasized a nationwide spirit of volunteerism and introduced new requirements for citizenship. Nobody seemed to notice. Quoting now, we are quoting the Select Services Alternative Service for Conscientious Objectors. Quoting, a major part of the contingency plan for alternative service is to identify agencies and associations which could assist the selective service system in placing conscientious objectors in suitable alternative service jobs. Conscientious objectors who are to be placed in the alternative service program will be asked to describe their skills, aptitudes, and interest in order to facilitate their placement. An attempt will be made to match the objector's skills and aptitudes to an eligible job, while at the same time ensuring that his service makes a meaningful contribution to the national interest. All assignments will be made within 30 days of reclassification to conscientious objector status. Examples of alternative service work are conservation, caring for the very young and the very old, educational projects, and healthcare. In America, cops go door to door with neighborhood groups gathering data for ABCD. They help build safer communities and collaborate with the Department of Homeland Security to build up the military and citizen volunteer corps. Select citizens are now authorized to write tickets for crimes against the community. New community groups form every day, and they all organize around the same nice ideas. In Iraq, US soldiers host block watch meetings and train locals to report any suspicious strangers or noise. The new system in place is communitarian in makeup. And that's quoted. Another quote. It is still too early to tell exactly or even approximately what the powers and purview of the new political advisory council will be. It does, however, seem safe to say that the new council, when it officially meets in early July, will not be a precursor to the Western version of democracy, an aggressively secular regime embodying a one-person, one-vote principle and strict majority rule. Rather, it appears to be communitarian in makeup, cleverly designed to give each distinct group a voice and each substantial group an effective veto over recommendations or decrees, says Leonard J. Hochberg, PhD, and James D. Hard, Jr., PhD, also, Creating Democracy in Iraq, ? Comes from NMIR, June 19th, 2003. It appears so here's the difference. So one person, one vote principle and strict majority rule is the old democracy. The new democracy is groups, distinct groups given a voice. So that's like, you know, maybe the LGBT community, or just the lesbian community, or just the queer community will have, will vote like a cell, like an organ, like an organism. Like as an individual would, a whole population will be represented by some label. Just like we have the voice and the treaties for the indigenous people, and how whether they like it or not, all the you know, indigenous people are covered by some corporation. And that will be the same for all of us. We'll all be bundled into some kind of label, some kind of group, and others will speak on our behalf. We will think we are speaking through have your say, yay, nay, you know, fill in the survey stuff. But in actual fact, the communities that will participate in democracy will be weighted. For example, one individual may get one vote, let's say, like one person, one unit. A company, however, because they are also part of the community, and I was made aware of this when we were surveyed by chance by the water utilities company, who asked us if we were happy with them as a member of the community. So they considered themselves, the utility company, the for-profit utility company, was asking if we were pleased with them as a member of the community. So, you know, the companies are now labeled as members of the community. And now a company that provides water is not going to have the same weight in their vote as an individual. So a corporation, let's say a supermarket chain, as a member of the community, will have much more say than any actual person, because their contribution to the community is so big. Like the reliance upon a supermarket chain is, you know, it's biased. Okay, so what they say will go because they're much more important to the community than one little individual. Keep in mind the greater good. So they serve the many, you just serve yourself, or some smaller number, depending on your credit rating and how many good deeds you've done. So we are not talking about like equal weight, one vote per person. We are talking about bodies being formed and some consensus being reached, and others speaking on your behalf, and you being sort of like bundled. And also, and what's even worse, is having corporations calling themselves community members. What hope have you got when you go up against Coca-Cola or Nestle? Not much. They're going to have the power of veto, it says here. Ruling the world, I'm finishing now. Ruling the world can't work if there's a bunch of different political systems and national power structures. Every country has to have the same law. To communitarians, it makes more sense to build the exact same system in Iraq, the rest of the Middle East, and of course, the entire world. And that's the end of chapter 3, and we're up to page 50. So we're halfway through, and I'll attempt to, I always say this, I'll stop making promises. I'll thank you for watching, and I'll see the comments afterwards, and wishing you a lovely evening and a good week. See you again next time.